If you remember from last Sunday, we heard Jesus being put to the test where they ask him an impossible question. Is it licit for us to pay the temple tax to Caesar or not? And no matter how he answers it, if it's yes or no, they're going to turn him over either to the Romans or to the Jews, and it will end in his being crucified. And then he uses his divine wisdom and says, show me a coin that is used to pay the tax. And when they showed him a Roman denarius, he said, whose face is that and whose inscription is it? And they said, Caesar. And he says, well, give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but give to God what belongs to God. And then today we hear that now the Pharisees get their turn to try to trip up Jesus, to try to ask him also an impossible question. Of all, aside from the 10 Commandments, there was 620 different things that the Jews had to observe, different do's and don'ts that are throughout the Old Testament. And so he has asked, which of the commandments in the law is the greatest? That'd be like asking a mother of 12 children, which is your favorite child or which is your greatest child or the most important child? You can't answer that question. But Jesus cuts straight to the chase. He doesn't beat around the bush at all. He says what's called the great Shema. Hear, O Israel, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. But he doesn't leave it there. He says, and the second is like it. Like a coin must have two sides. You cannot have, no matter how thinly you slice a coin, you cannot just have one side. There has to be two sides. And he says, and the second is like it. He takes something from Leviticus chapter 19 and yokes it together with that and says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. So there's not just such a thing as what is the most important thing to do, but rather that is a two-sided coin. To love God above all things and to love our neighbor as ourselves. It is absolutely simple, but we must never confuse simple with easy. And so that's why each day, each time we do something, we have to ask ourselves, do we truly love the Lord God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind? And if we say yes to that, then our browsing history on our phones and our computer better back that up. That we're looking at sites that pertain to God and staying away from sites that pertain to the devil. Our checkbook needs to back that up too. We must show that we are giving to the church. We're supporting God in all of the different ministries that we're doing, but also our love of neighbor has to be in there somewhere too. And so we must do these little litmus tests each day and to do self-sacrifice. If we find we love, say, sports, and we've been looking forward to watching this particular sporting event all week, well, maybe out of love of God, maybe we would say, well, as much as I would like to watch this, and Lord, you know it, I'll just not watch the first 15 minutes of it and then tune in later. I give you that time. And you can sit there and pray for your team that they're going to win or whatever. But many times when we give in to ourselves first and then put God towards the end of the day, that's not going to work out. So we have to do these little self-denials throughout the day. But when we're told we must love our neighbor as ourselves, that goes beyond how do we treat our children or our friends or our families. Even pagans know to treat their friends and families well, and maybe even the person that physically lives next to them. But the neighbor that Jesus is talking about is, he will go on to give the parable of the Good Samaritan, because he would be asked later, and who is my neighbor? And then it was told about the Good Samaritan, then two groups of people that despised each other, the Jews and the Samaritans. And a Samaritan one day sees a Jew lying half dead by the side of the road after having been beaten and left for dead and mugged. And a Levite sees him and passes by. A priest sees him and passes him by. But a Samaritan comes and tends to his needs. He doesn't see a man who's half dead. He sees a man who's half alive. And he doesn't care that it is a Jew. He says, this person needs my help. And imagine if another bunch of Jews from Jerusalem, because this was on the road from Jerusalem, came and saw him leaning over a Jewish person. They would have thought that he's the one that inflicted those wounds, and they probably would have killed him. But he wasn't counting the cost. He just saw somebody in need, someone in the image and likeness of God, even though they were of different races, different creeds. They've been taught to be sworn enemies of each other. That is how we're supposed to love. Love those that don't love us back. And we must remember that old adage of joy. And the world lacks this kind of joy this day. Jesus, others, and then yourself. If we put God in first place, particularly in Jesus Christ, and then we try to love Jesus with all our heart and soul and being, and then we love our neighbor, the second side of that coin, as our very self, then we treat ourselves in third place, we will have that kind of joy that will be infectious. We haven't seen that kind of joy since the mid-90s when Mother Teresa died. And if you remember Mother Teresa, she was one of, I dare say, one of the most beautiful women on the planet. Maybe she's not going to win any beauty contests, but her smile and that withered face with the deep wrinkles from being out in the sun and out in the, just with the poor for her entire life. And she's bent over and she was like more powerful than Yoda. She didn't need a lightsaber. Her lightsaber was her faith and her mouth. And she would call out even presidents about their stance against the unborn and things like that. But what made her so beautiful was she smiled through her eyes, and it just radiated the room. And imagine you're dying in Calcutta. You're being literally left on the side of the road by your own people. No one wanted to have anything to do with you, but she would bring you in to their convent, and you were treated for the last moments or days or hours of your life like royalty. And you would see that beautiful face that we now call Saint Teresa of Calcutta. But when she founded her religious order, and she had a deep conversion within her own religious life. She entered religious life relatively young, and then she was teaching, pretty well-to-do children and all of that. But one day, when she was in Calcutta, she saw a pile of rags in an alleyway, and she saw rats running inside, back and forth in that pile of rags. And then it got her attention. She goes up close, and she realized it was a person that was lying there. And something inside of her just changed forever. And that moment changed the world forever. When she founded her religious order, in addition to the evangelical vows that they take of poverty, of chastity, and of obedience, she mandated they must make a fourth vow that is binding, one of joy. Joy. Imagine that. And that's why at her funeral, over 1 million people showed up, and hardly any of them were Christian, because people saw in their midst a saint. What is preventing us from being that person that radiates joy with a smile, that embraces those beliefs that we hold as Catholics? And it's a very, very simple equation. It's not easy, but it's simple. Love God with all your mind, that you're always thinking of God. If you're always thinking of God, then by nature you're going to be thinking of your spouse. You're going to be thinking of your children. You're going to be thinking about the unborn or whoever else it is that no one else is going to be thinking about. And so if we love God above everything, and then our neighbor as ourselves, not just our friends and family, but then love each other as God intends us to, then we are totally living and fulfilling our faith. But it is something, like I said, it is not an easy thing to do, and even Mother Teresa struggled with that. She struggled seeing Jesus in the midst of her chaotic world. And so the gospel today gives us much food for thought about trying to see God and to love him above all things, but also to love our neighbor. And our love for God is only going to be as strong as the love that we have for the person that I dare say we despise the most, or the person that has treated us the most cruelly. How is that? If you can have angelic love, perfect love for 99 people, but if you resent, hate, or despise one person, that's the weak link in your chain. And a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And so if there's one person that we just can't forgive, we just can't get over it, and it's above your pay grade, give it to him. Give it to him. Look at Jesus. That's why we look at crucifixes and not the risen touchdown Jesus, but the crucified Jesus, to remind us that with his dying breath, he told his Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. And so when we think that we've been radically offended or hurt or despised by somebody, and we look at a crucifix, our problems kind of go away and they melt. And then how can we say to God, I can't forgive this person, when Jesus is begging the Father for the forgiveness of all because they know not what they do? And so maybe we need to give alms in memory of a particular person that maybe we're having a tough time with, or we can maybe leave an extra tip at a restaurant in memory of somebody that we have a very particular hard time with. And something that comes to mind, this past Sunday, one of our parishioners, you probably heard of, Luke Morgan, passed away, just suddenly died in his sleep. And his funeral was yesterday at the cathedral, and it was a packed cathedral. I'm glad it was there because there was no way we could have fit everybody in here. But in his obituary, his family asked, in lieu of flowers, and it was very beautiful, it says, go and eat at your favorite restaurant or get takeout from your favorite restaurant and leave an outrageously generous tip. Because as a former waiter, Luke knew the importance of taking care of those that serve and wait on us, but also, especially in a time of pandemic, supporting our local businesses and restaurants. And so when we try to do that, then we are loving God and we are loving our neighbor. And so we make little sacrifices and offerings in reparation for the times that we have hurt other people. But if we just keep our eyes focused on Jesus first, then the needs of others, and then yourself, then we will have that joy that will be radiant and that will infect everybody. At Mother Teresa's funeral, like I said, there was over 1 million people. And we're still, seems to be waiting for that next saint to come along. It's not a matter that God has yet to send that next great saint. He already has. It's you and it's me. Jesus is going to enter into our bodies today in Holy Communion, not as a symbol, but as the greatest reality. And as a woman who is pregnant must guard this life that is within her and avoid things that could harm that life, we must do the same. And so, as I said before, our browsing history on our phone and computer will tell us where our heart is. And so it's a very simple equation. Love God above all things. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's not easy if we try to do it ourselves alone, but it becomes very easy when we do it with Christ, through Christ, and for Christ. And together let us profess our faith. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. I believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ,